I've reported on Russia and Iran getting increasingly cozy with each other, and that's not good news. Since Russia invaded Ukraine, its dependence on Iran has grown. Russia has been getting its drones and missiles from Iran to use against Ukraine to kill people, destroy infrastructure. But now it has gotten worse. Iran is now producing its weaponized drones on Russian soil, not 3,000 plus miles back home in Iran, but on Russian soil. This according to the Washington Post, who cited intelligence seen by U.S. and other Western security agencies. A deal between Iran and Russia was finalized earlier this month, and now the two nations are reportedly moving quickly to transfer designs and key components to produce the drones. That means hundreds of drones could be made within months. Producing the drones on Russian soil so close to Ukraine could dramatically change the trajectory of the war. Former U.S. military representative to NATO, retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt joins me. Good evening, sir. And do I overstate the significance of having these Iranian-made drones or Iranian-designed drones being made on Russian soil?
Good evening, Greta. No, you don't understate it at all. At every single level, from the tactics on the battlefield all the way up to the geostrategic in the Middle East and the great relationships, this changes a lot of things. But it makes the war very, very dangerous. Chuck Holton's report was masterful and a good segue to what this means. Those drones give the Russians a capability to take out the last 50% of that power grid. And unfortunately, in my own analysis and from my own sources, I do believe that's what they aim to do and aim to achieve by the end of January.
Well, they have no heat, no water, no lights, rolling blackouts in some areas, but in some places that where Kherson, it's even worse. They don't have any of that. They've, you look at the video, and the infrastructure has been destroyed. Residential buildings have been hit. People have been killed. And now, of course, if they're making those drones that they can send over into Ukraine risk-free, they just tell them where to go. It certainly does seem to me to be so much more catastrophic than we were even 2 weeks ago.
Right. So if you look at the cascading risk from this, yes, I get it. The spirit of the Ukrainian people is not to be anything but admired. But taking all these things off the table for the Ukrainians basically takes away life support and survival. Think of the follow-on wave effect for a refugee crisis into Europe resultant from that. And all the other effects. So what we've got to be looking at is microgrids that can get some sort of life support into Ukraine to sustain them. And at the same time, we really should not walk away from the prospects that the combatants need to get to the table and start to discuss the war, as hard as that sounds right now with the way both of them are aimed at each other.
Well, it's so cold right now in Ukraine this time of year. Let me turn to Zaporizhzhia, the nuclear power plant. Neither side is taking responsibility for having the rockets rattle the area. No radiation leak so far. That's the good news. But it certainly is a big target. And I don't know. At what point does Putin decide to take out Zaporizhzhia, or doesn't he?
He could. Part of a nuclear bomb is to create a dirty bomb, and Zaporizhzhia represents a grave threat to not just Ukraine, but it's the surrounding countries, but also to some extent parts of Russia as well. But the bigger thing here is they're both blaming each other. This is where the UN and NATO needs to stand up and to basically declare that they're demanding we get a demilitarized zone here, not just for the sake of Ukraine, but for the sake of all of the combatants and the global community in that area. And the IAEA, when they can get in there, they'll look at the forensics. It'll be fairly simple to determine whose shells created this damage. But what we don't want to see is a follow-on wave attack. I'll tell you, Greta, the Russians are not very far from being able to flip the switch and go to what we call total war, which is just basically erasing Ukraine.
Well, the other day everyone was sort of cheering the fact that Kherson that the Russians had fled Kherson, and all of a sudden that seemed like a huge victory. But what would stop Putin?
Well, his inner circle is deteriorating, and confidence in the war in Russia is waning fast. Their economy is draining. So can Putin last long enough to see the victory that would be the erasure of Ukraine? Because the Ukrainians are fierce fighters. They're going to throw rocks at what they're left with. But I do think that as long as Putin is sitting in that position, and as long as he's able to sell commodities to China and India and have this relationship with Iran, they've got a very sustainable campaign. in front of them.
Well, and you talked about getting the two sides of the table. I mean, I don't see President Zelensky. He has said I don't see him going to the table. I mean, at what point does he go to the table? I don't see what point Putin goes to the table either. But at what point does either one of them say, "Okay, let's talk"?
So this is where I think China, India, and the United States should come together and decide, since they're on opposite ends of this spectrum, how they want to approach the combatants and try to get them to a table. China and India have repeatedly told Putin they don't want this war to last much longer. And I think that the West, the collective West, EU, NATO, United States, are getting to this same place with Zelensky. And so it doesn't mean anybody's giving up anything, but maybe it would be a very good time to sit back and talk about whether this is in all our best interest or not.
General Blaine Holt, thank you, sir.
Great to be with you. Thank you.